Why do you start motivated and then give up? At the beginning, everything feels different. You feel clear, energized, and optimistic. You make plans. You promise yourself this time will be different. But a few days later, the motivation disappears. The excitement fades. The work feels heavier, and slowly, you stop. Most people think this means they're lazy or that they lack discipline. But that's not the real reason. The truth is, your brain is reacting exactly as it was designed to. And once you understand how this works, the pattern finally makes sense. Motivation doesn't disappear randomly. It follows a predictable psychological cycle, and almost everyone gets trapped in it without realizing why. At the start, motivation feels effortless. You don't need reminders. You don't need discipline. Action feels natural. That's because your brain is operating on emotion, not logic. Emotion gives energy before effort is required. But emotion is unstable. The moment the feeling fades, you are left alone with the work. And this is where most people get confused. They think something went wrong, but nothing did. This is the exact moment when real progress is supposed to begin. When you start something new, your brain releases dopamine. Dopamine isn't the reward itself. It's the anticipation of reward. That anticipation creates excitement. It makes starting feel easy. It gives you energy before any results exist. But dopamine is tied to novelty. Once the activity becomes familiar, dopamine drops. The brain now has to spend energy without excitement, and the brain's main goal is efficiency, not success. So when progress feels slow or boring, your brain quietly pulls motivation away. Not to sabotage you, but to conserve energy. Once dopamine drops, the brain reassesses the situation. It asks a simple question: is this worth the energy? If the reward is distant or unclear, the answer becomes no. Not consciously, automatically. This is why motivation disappears suddenly. Not because you changed, but because your brain updated its cost calculation. Understanding this matters, because it means the problem isn't character, it's biology. This is why willpower rarely works long-term. Willpower requires constant effort, and effort feels uncomfortable to the brain. So the brain looks for exits. It creates thoughts like, I'll do it tomorrow. I'm not in the right mood. I'll start again next week. These thoughts feel logical, but they're not decisions. They're avoidance signals. Most people obey these signals without questioning them, and over time, quitting becomes a habit, not because of failure, but because the brain learned that stopping removes discomfort. Avoidance is reinforced through relief. When you stop working, tension drops. The brain remembers that. Next time discomfort appears, avoidance feels like the correct choice. Not because it helps you, but because it removes pressure. This is how quitting becomes automatic. No decision is made, no failure is announced. You simply drift away from the effort. And the longer this pattern repeats, the stronger it becomes. If you don't see yourself as someone who follows through, your brain treats effort as temporary. You might want change, but your identity still says, this isn't who I am. So when resistance appears, your brain protects the identity you already believe in. This is why motivation alone never transforms people. Without identity change, Every attempt feels like acting against yourself. Waiting for motivation feels responsible. It feels like patience, but it's avoidance disguised as logic. People who change don't feel less resistance. They feel it and act anyway. They don't rely on emotional readiness. They rely on systems, and systems remove choice. When action becomes routine, motivation is no longer required. This is how consistency is actually built. The solution isn't more motivation. It's reducing resistance. Instead of asking, "How do I stay motivated?" ask, "How do I make starting easier?" Lower the first step. Make it so small it feels almost meaningless. This tells your brain the action is safe. Action creates momentum. Momentum creates motivation, not the other way around. You don't need confidence. You don't need discipline. You need movement while feeling uncomfortable. Motivation follows action, and once you understand that, quitting stops being automatic. Identity changes through evidence, not through affirmation. Every small action is a vote for the person you are becoming. When you act, even briefly, your brain updates its self-image, and the next action becomes slightly easier. This is how momentum is created, not through force, but through repetition. Small actions reshape identity, and identity makes quitting harder.